So they leaked my whole presentation to the Wall Street Journal. All of a sudden, security comes in. They usher me out of the building. My security credentials are pulled. I go home and I try to pull in the driveway, but there's all these dark-colored Ford cars. They're taking computers out of my house. They're doing search warrants. Before Donald Trump left the White House, instead of pardoning people, he should have had a boardroom and he should have fired the Fed, and then we all would be good shape.
Stick around to the end of every episode because Bo quizzes me on what I learned. Can you beat my score? Bet you can't.
All right. Welcome to Commercially Speaking. My name is Timmy. This is my brother, Bo Barron, CCIM.
And this is my brother, Timmy Barron, ADHD, and we are live for the first time.
In this podcast, Bo teaches me everything about commercial real estate. I know nothing. Comedy and acting is my field, so this has been quite a ride.
Well, it's been fun. And look, all this editing you've done of these episodes, it's like taking a college class on commercial real estate. So, yeah, you've amazed me with what you've picked up so far.
All right, we've got a guest that's coming in today. Bo, who do we got?
Yeah, Casey Conway, I think he's the first time I've heard an economist also kind of play that role as a futurist. So he's not afraid to tell you what he thinks is going to happen. So a lot of these economists will come in and they'll just interpret the data. He'll tell you what he thinks is about to happen. And he's not afraid to name names. And Casey Conway, show yourself, man. Let's see you.
Show yourself. There he is. Way more handsome than I thought. I wanted to say that Bo sent me a picture of you at the CCIM conference that happened, I guess, last week or the week before.
Yeah, last week in Boston.
And we've talked about you a little bit before, but until I saw the picture of you and this picture of you, the text that I wrote back immediately was nice shoes. Nice shoes. And I see behind you Red Shoe Economics. And so I first of all, I think that's brilliant. Like, that's brilliant marketing, number one. But I'm curious as to, could you give us like a 5-minute origin story of how that came about? Like maybe your beginnings into this field and how it turned into what is now Red Shoe Economics.
Here's the original red suede shoes. Whoa. And what happened is in 2014, when I got hired by the University of Alabama to help be the director of research and grow the real estate center up, I decided I should send a nice email to the dean. But see, I went to Emory University in Atlanta, and we thought the SEC was the Securities Exchange Commission. And so I didn't know what the hell this other SEC was all about. So when I sent the dean a nice note saying thank you, I found out they did something like, they think they play football over there. And so I sent a nice note, but I misspelled Coach Saban's name.
Oh.
So my probation period is I had to wear these for 6 months. And so when we got all done, she said, okay, put away the red shoes. And then when they decided to lay me off during COVID because they got rid of all the adjunct professors that weren't tenured, they hadn't copyrighted it. And so I said, well, I'll just keep that. My business partner, Beverly Keith, had the good idea to keep it. So Red Shoe Economics came about because I couldn't spell Coach Saban's name. And now I wear really hip red shoes.
Yeah, those are the ones I saw. And I was like, nice shoes.
So I tell my 12-year-old son, don't worry about spelling. The more you misspell, the more you may have a business someday.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. As somebody who does not spell good at all.
You don't smell good either?
I smell great right now. Well, Casey, tell us what's your expertise and what are we talking about today?
So I froze up again, but we'll leave it alone. So I started out, I grew up in Colorado in a developer family. My dad was the land guy that put Vail, Colorado together. And that came about during the Paul Volcker era when he decided to take interest rates to prime to 21%.
Oh wait, so, you can't just throw out Paul Volcker. You gotta explain.
It's Paul.
So Paul Volcker was the original guy that decided to teach us what high interest rates do to commercial real estate. So he took it from like where we are today to 21% in about a 7-year period, shut the economy down, and he got a lot of interesting mail. Builders would mail him 2x4s with all kinds of expletives and whatnot. But I wrote a piece about 2 years ago saying we're headed back that way. So that's where my futures come in. I could see what we're going towards. But it was the last time we really saw high interest rates. Most people, right, Bo, they don't remember that period.
Yeah, my dad talks about it because he was in the business back then. And right about the time I was 3-4 years old, around 1980, are those days that you're talking about. And he was the Fed chairman at the time, correct?
Yeah, Paul Volcker was the Fed chair, and then he came back and they made a rule about him for the 2008-9 financial crisis. So, and what's interesting, what's scary, is the current Fed chair, Jay Powell. His mentor was Paul Volcker.
Oh.
So he thinks maybe the Volcker era is a good thing to bring back here, which scares the bejesus out of me. That's an economics term, bejesus.
Oh, yeah. I know, but Jesus, I know how to spell that too.
I know about the Fed because I've been in commercial real estate for 20 years, but I couldn't really explain it to anybody. And Timmy, being in the, the actor comedian space, knows little about the Fed other than what he's researched in the last couple of weeks. So, like, if you were trying to explain the Federal Reserve to a fifth grader, how would you do it?
I was in the Fed, both the Atlanta and New York Fed, 2005 to 10, during the last real nightmare. And I can tell you, these are all academics that know nothing of what they're preaching about, and just think about this right now from what we're in. So we have Silicon Valley Bank failure that just blew everything up. And we're going to have a reincarnation of that here, I think, next week. I think we could have a First Republic Bank. All the indications are today they may not make this week and whatnot. But Silicon Valley Bank posted their 10K. So that's a document where you raise your hand and say, Mom and Dad, I swear to God, I left the money in my piggy bank. And they filed their 10K to the SEC. And in that report, they said, if we have to mark all of our assets to market, all the things that we're holding that are fixed rate stuff, we're insolvent. That was the second week of January. And nobody did a damn thing for 2 months. And so it's just mind boggling to me. And that's what we really have. And the other thing is the San Francisco Fed, which is where Janet Yellen came from, our Treasury Secretary. And I knew her quite well. She didn't know anything about real estate either. Still didn't know anything about real estate or the economy. So it was her district bank that was supervising Silicon Valley Bank that allowed the entire venture capital world to be financed by one bank. Now, we don't do that with the auto industry, with the energy industry. So where the hell were these bank examiners in San Francisco supervising them? Where were they in reading the 10K and knowing they had a problem? And the other thing is, there's all these programs and vehicles that we have within the regulatory world that could have mitigated everything that happened. So one of them is deposits. Remember, the FDIC had to write a check for $40 billion or something for all the deposits and all the 10 rich billionaires that had their money in there. So there's a program called CDARS, CDARS. It is a program where if somebody wants to put $10 billion in a bank and they know they're only insured for $250,000, the CDARS program has that bank distribute in $250,000 increments out to over 3,000 banks. And if they had done that, which is they're supposed to do, we would have never had any loss. But of course, the banks don't want to do that because they want all those deposits. So if you go get a loan, right, Bo? What is the first thing the banker says? Well, darn, I don't have all of your money. Give me all your money and I'll give you a loan. And so this, perverse behavior, the lack of bank supervision is atrocious. And the Fed should be fired. So how we got to a Fed, this is our third central bank. So believe it or not, we had two others that failed. And so this one was concocted on a trip over Christmas when Congress was out of session to an island, Jekyll Island in Georgia. And they said, let's create this new central bank that, in my opinion and all my research, is unconstitutional. It has no validity, but it has more power than Congress, than the president. I mean, they're not even a third branch of government. They have more power than all three branches of the government. So it's something that, before Donald Trump left the White House, instead of pardoning people, he should have had a boardroom and he should have fired the Fed, and then we all would be good shape.
Yeah. So why did it come about?
So, we came out of this era, you come out of the pre-Civil War. Every state had its own currency, and it was just kind of like trading with Europe. How do I trust this currency? Or, does someone bring me 10,000 bales of cotton to get, 3,000 fish or whatever? And so we needed to have a central currency. But how we got there and where you create all the central banks. So, we have 12 of these central banks. And believe it or not, these central banks like the Atlanta Fed where I'm at, or the St. Louis Fed, they're not .gov entities. They're their own private entities, and they can pay those. They're residents $500,000, where poor Jay Powell only makes like $200,000. And so all the power is, And so if you go in and look at, the different Fed district banks and what they're paid, you have senior vice presidents that are being paid more than Jay Powell. So they can do anything they want. They have their own board of directors. Most of them, we had 3 of them that have had to step down because they've been investing financially when they shouldn't be. We had to fire the Dallas Fed. We had to fire, I guess it was the Chicago Fed and the Atlanta Fed. That person had to resign because they break the rules and invest in whatever they want. So we have 12 of these districts. And so they're their own entity. And the compromise was, well, we'll put 1/12 of all the money in the country in each one of these banks. And so nobody has to worry that New York hijacked all the money in the country. It's spread around. They have input into the economy. So the agrarian economy has as much input or whatever as the Wall Street economy. And so here's interesting trivia. So here's a good question for you, Bo, for a test somewhere down the road. There's only one state in the entire union that has 2 Federal Reserve banks. And guess what it is?
Texas,
No,
Washington,
no,
Alaska.
California.
no, Missouri.
Oh, KC and St. Louis.
St. Louis, the Kansas City is on the Missouri side. And so think of the power that Missouri has with 2 Federal Reserve banks, and both their presidents are very solid people. I tell people, if you want to know the truth in the economy, read the minutes in the Beige Book, which is where they tell you what they think's going on once a quarter. Read on the interior banks like Kansas City or St. Louis. So Esther George, who I knew really well, she's retiring. Jim Board has been on inflation right away. These are the people. Do not listen to anybody from San Francisco or New York or the Atlanta Fed. They just don't have a clue.
Yeah. Huh. So if Bo, did you have something?
Yeah, but go ahead with your question.
What should I know as an investor or someone interested in investing in commercial real estate? What does this all mean to me?
What the Fed has done to us with these rate hikes is they're essentially creating a complete capital lockup in our country. There used to be a bank in North Carolina before it became Nations Bank, and Bank of America was called North Carolina National Bank, and the initials were NCNB. And I used to joke that was no cash for nobody. We have a no cash for nobody in commercial real estate right now, right? But you can't get a permanent loan. If you have a loan that's refining, the single most important thing is liquidity. And so if you're an investor in real estate, if you're a seller, if you're a buyer, you need to understand the capital composition, because our industry is one that relies on a lot of debt capital. And what the Fed has said to the banks, and they get mad at me every time I say this, is they've told the banks that lending is economic activity. And economic activity is inflationary, so quit lending money. So they want to shut the country down. They want to destroy their other mandate of full employment, which was the first mandate they got after World War II to get all the GIs reemployed. And so what we need to understand is capital is what makes our country and every industry, whether it's small business or real estate, we're a very capital intensive industry in commercial real estate. If we don't have it, it locks up. So anything maturing, refinancing, a construction loan that's finishing that needs to go to the permanent market, it's all locked up. And so what the Fed does next week for its May, June, and July meetings is going to determine whether it's the end of the world or maybe we survive. I don't know.
Oh, really? So this is all happening right now. And so what do you expect to happen next week?
I'm concerned. I think that the Fed's in a rock and a hard place. So on one hand, we still have inflation. So even though we had CPI and PPI and all these indicators that tell us whether there's real inflation, what you got to understand is those measures are largely played with quite a bit. It's like a game board. That's why I look at things like earnings report, because all companies, public companies, have to raise their hand every quarter and swear under penalty of perjury to the SEC and tell us what's going on. So when PepsiCo tells us what's going on in earnings this week, or Procter & Gamble, or one of these companies that are buying materials and selling things, they know whether we have inflation. And so what my fear is, we have what's called super core inflation. So you've heard of core and non-core, and this is where they wanted to make up numbers. But super core are the things that really cause inflation that we spend 80% of our money on. They're our wages, and our wages are going up because we can't go back to work. It's food, and primarily food at home. They call food at home groceries. It's shelter, in apartments or housing, and it's services. And all of those things are running like 7 to 10% inflation. And if that's 80% of the real number, and that's what the companies tell us in their earnings, we still have an inflation problem. So is the Fed going to continue to raise interest rates saying we're committed to getting rid of inflation? Or are they going to say, well, the alternative is if we do that, we have the banking crisis from Silicon Valley Bank come back here in May, June, and July. And since all these idiots have never done anything in the real economy, I'm really doubtful they'll do the right thing. And they'll raise interest rates because that's all they know how to do, and they're data dependent. And they don't look at real data. So they look at all this rear view mirror data. They look at bad government data that's manipulated. I look at forward-looking indicators. So as Bo knows, we created in the CCIM Institute a really cool tool. We created 2 years ago. I was involved in the co-creation. It's called CREPI. And most people think it's a bait fish, that you use to go catch other fish. You can go, not CREPI, it's CREPI for a commercial real estate performance index. So when we put it together, we decided to get together in Georgia And our goal was to see if we could find just 10 simple indicators that all look out the window, like University of Michigan Consumer Confidence, or, the Commercial Property Price Index, the companies that look at like CoStar and RCA and Green Street that look at what's happening in prices. Could we find 10 of those, put them together in an algorithm that's very predictive? So we did that. You go to sitetodobusiness.com/CREPI, CREPI, and it's all free and it's all transparent, unlike the Fed. And so we back tested it back to the last century, and we never missed a downturn or an uptick in the market in the past decade. Looks like this thing's going away. I need to come.
Oh, there it is. No, there we go. Nice.
And so you can see last year we hit the all-time record low. We're bouncing off 82 or 83, but the data is a little bit lagged because all of them come at different times. So by the time we get to the real March or April data, my forecast is we'll go below the record low 80 and we'll go into the 70s. But this is very intuitive. It's very transparent. You can look at the 10 metrics. And so this is what I look at. I've offered it to the Fed. There's the 10 right there. They're all windshield. They're all looking forward. This is real time, every bit of data. If we could get the Fed to look at that, they might have a chance of getting it right. But I think they're going to raise rates in May. They might be inclined to pause in June or July because they're starting to see the demand destruction. And I think if they raise in May, we put about 200 banks over the cliff that are probably going to fail. And
Okay.
we have a real...
I want to get into the banking stuff, but let me ask you a couple clarifying questions. CPI is the Consumer Price Index, kind of measures inflation. But you also mentioned PPI, and I'm sitting here thinking, and I hear that term PPI, what's that one actually stand for?
PPI is the Producer Price Index. So people that make things and manufacture things, we really want to pay attention to their inflation because that's what gets passed on to the consumer. So that's why I look at Procter & Gamble and Pepsi and what's the input cost of Frito chips and Coca-Cola. If those are all going up, that tells me that's coming into CPI, and CPI is not tamed. And we're seeing on the production side, all of those input items are still going up, 5 to 8% a quarter. One that's the Fed's favorite that should be right, that they should look at, but they don't understand a certain behavior mechanism. It's called PCE, the Personal Consumption Expenditures. So they look at what the consumer is spending their money on, like groceries and gasoline, and saying what's happening to that. The problem is what consumers are doing right now is they go to the grocery store and they see that, the price of one steak is what they used to get for. And so they can't afford steak. So what do? They buy chicken or they buy, pork. They buy something cheaper. They do a substitution. So the Fed says since they came to the store to spend $250 and they're still spending $250, there's no personal consumption expenditure inflation. They're substituting goods. So if the kid wants the Coke or Pepsi product, but they can't afford the brand, they buy a generic brand to bring the price down for the soda, or Gatorade's too expensive and now it's whatever. So that's the flaw in the Fed's PCE is they're not discovering the change in the behavior for the basket of goods. So none of them are really very good. And that's why I look at the earnings reports, because these companies are telling us straight out what's happening, what their input costs are, what they're around the world. And so my indicator I look at most for inflation is what these companies are telling us out of earnings.
What I hear in the news is we had those 2 big bank failures. Nothing's happened since then. We're probably just fine. You don't seem to agree with that.
Are you having fun yet? If you are in fact enjoying these videos, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel, turn on that notification bell, ding ding, and ask us any questions you got in the comments.
No, and we get more confusion of that because of the bank earnings last week and this week. So big ones like U.S. Bank or PNC, Huntington Bank shares that don't do crazy things. They don't do too much real estate. They don't do venture capital. They're really, down the road, well balanced. They've all come out and said, hey, we're great. So everybody thinks, oh, the banks are all okay. Now we're getting into the regionals and some of the smaller, banks, and they're saying we have a problem, like a Truist Bank, right? And Truist says, oh my God, we can't make money. Our expenses are way up. We look like SVP in terms of all the fixed assets that we have on our balance sheet, like mortgages and all that. And so their CEO says, I don't have a clue how to grow a bank, so I'm just going to cut the hell out of everything. And so what the Texas ratio is we got to go way back to the 1980s. A couple of smart folks said, let's just see if we can predict who's going to go next. So they said a really good predictor would be we'll take all those risky assets that are on a bank that they got to mark to market and they haven't marked to the market, and let's look at what they aggregate as a percentage of their total assets. Makes sense, right? So a bank only has a dime of capital. People think the banks are all well capitalized. They have a dime. Anything drops 10%, they're wiped out, they're gone. They're not well capitalized. So when you see those risky assets become more or at 10% of their total capital, that means they're insolvent. They're essentially insolvent. That's what SVB says. And so we have a lot of walking dead banks, and we haven't even dealt with the banks that have real estate concentration. So we call them CRE concentrated banks. And what that says is if they have more than 300% of that dime, so if they have 30 cents of commercial real estate for the dime of capital, they're CRE concentrated. All those banks haven't marked these assets to market yet. So the Texas ratios take your risk assets that haven't been marked to market. It means they can wipe out all your capital. What are they a percentage of your capital? And when it gets to 5%, you need to start raising capital. It's really hard for a bank to raise capital. It gets anywhere near 10, you're essentially insolvent. Well, we have banks right now that are, 12, 20, 30% Texas ratios, and they're in every state. So no one's immune. Even Florida has some that has Texas ratios that are whacked. So it's still maintained today. Most people don't know it. You can just Google Texas ratio and it'll take you to posits.com. It's maintained by lending tree. And it pre-calculates the Texas ratio for every bank and credit union in the country. Why do we need bank supervision? Just go look at the damn Texas ratio and it'll tell you which banks are going to fail. Yeah. And so when I look at that, we've got 200 to 300 that are over 10% on walking dead. And so if the Fed raises rates more, they make that problem worse. And are they going to punt like they did on SVB and not take them down? Or are they going to take them down? And, we have 5,000 banks in the country. So the Fed's attitude is kind of cavalier. So we lose 1,000 banks. So when I was out there in 2005 and 10 and we lost 500 between 2009 and 2011, the Fed's attitude was, we had like 6,000 banks. So let's get it down to 1,000. Canada is like 5. And so they don't understand that those additional banks, they're largely community banks that may be the only bank that's lending in a community like Quad Cities, Iowa, or, Wichita, Kansas. And so if that bank fails, that's the only banking in that community or market. And the Fed doesn't get this because they don't do on-site bank exams anymore. They don't get out and see things very much. And so that's what worries me is these guys just don't know how to connect the dots. But I look at the Texas ratio. It's a predictor of who's going to be at risk for failure next. It's also important for us, Bo, as we talked about in Boston, for everybody doing a real estate transaction to know the Texas ratio of the bank that's involved in the financing of the transaction that's happening. Because if you're doing business on a transaction with a bank that has a 10% Texas ratio, they're probably not going to be at the closing table in 90 days. And then a deal that you worked on for 6 months to a year blows up, not because of you or the buyer or the seller or the tenant, but because no one was paying attention. So I tell everybody right now, if you're doing a commercial real estate transaction, you need to go look at the Texas ratio for the banks that are involved in that transaction.
Did you know any of this, Bo?
Well, I listened to him talk about it last week, so yes.
Well, I'm curious, from listening to that, have you gone to check the banks that you have that, on the last syndication deal you did? Did you go and look at the Texas ratio of that bank?
Yeah, I haven't. Of course, the last deal we did like that was it was 10 months ago now. So it was right before all the rate hikes started. And nobody was worried about the banks, at least not in my town,
Well, is that something that you would... Casey, is that something you suggest Bo do with a transaction he's already done? Should he go look at that bank, or is he safe because it was before that?
No, it's kind of like we need to check our weight every once in a while to see how many calories we're taking in. We should check the Texas ratio every day if we're in real estate. Or really if you're a small business, if you're any kind of entity, business, you need to know what's going on in your bank. So I got an email while I was in Boston, Bo, where American Express said, we're reviewing your account for contraction of your credit.
Well, you mentioned this on the stage. Yeah.
I got great credit score. My credit utilization is only like 25%. I'm a 26-year client. I pay more than I need every month or whatever. And I call them, I'm like, what's going on? They go, what? It's just
Good job, Casey. Okay, go ahead.
So I raised hell, and they said, well, if you would just make a double payment for April, we'll make sure we don't do anything. So I said, it's a hostage thing. Fine, screw it. I don't need a problem. I'll pay it. So this morning when I wake up, I get this notice from American Express. I'm a small business, and we use our American Express Sky Miles card to buy our travel and all that. And they said, we've contracted your credit by 75% just because. I said, my credit score didn't change. My utilization didn't change. I paid on time. Why are you doing this? They transferred me to 3 people, and after an hour, they dropped off and wouldn't talk. So I did a post. We need to remember what happened in 2009 and 10, right, Bo? So all these businesses and all these households that thought they had a home equity line of $50,000 or $100,000 that had credit cards that said you got a $10,000 unused balance, all the banks engaged in bad behavior, the big banks, the Wells Fargo,
Oh,
and
man.
they contracted everybody's credit.
One of my mentors, he's passed away since this happened, but in 2009 or 10 probably, he was with BB&T, which is now Truist rather. They called his credit lines, all of them, millions of dollars. And I was having lunch with him, and he was telling me about his morning and how they called and said, look, we're calling it all. And he looked at me, he's like, I'm probably the only guy in town that they could do that to, and I could actually go write him a check. Like, he never did business with them again. But yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
That just all of a sudden that could happen, you know.
So check out my LinkedIn post today. I railed on American Express. And here's the thing they don't know. So I know the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. I was there when we created it. It's a nightmare. It's part of why I left the Fed in 2010. And, and I still briefed it. The bank regulators tell me come in every quarter. And I briefed them the week before Silicon Bank failure. And I said, you guys have no idea when commercial real estate reprices because cap rate's going up, you have a huge problem. And you're probably looking at a couple of 300 bank failures. That was the week before it failed.
Wow.
And they had no idea what I was. I had all the conference of state bank supervisors, the FDIC, the Fed, totally clueless. And the same thing's happening right now, that you want to really create and cement a a recession forecast. You pull the credit on small business. And small businesses, most of their funding is variable rate. It's not fixed rate. So, but we're worrying about, wow, I've got to pay 7% on a loan or whatever for commercial real estate. These small businesses are paying 12 to 14%. Or they're like me, I'm putting my travel on American Express. I'm hoping my client pays me on time. My lawyers never pay on time, And so if I don't and I have to carry any, I'm paying, even on American Express with good credit, I'm paying 12 to 14%. So now that goes 14 to 18 to 20%. That's all the margin in small business. They're out of business. And this is the stuff that our central bank and the Fed should care about, that they're doing nothing about. So that was my rail on American Express today. If you can get rid of American Express and go, get a community bank, get a credit union, because it's the community banks and it's credit unions that fund our local communities. They know us. They know our market. They were all the way through in COVID. So I tell people, if you haven't hugged a community banker or a credit union lately, go hug one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been my experience the last 15 years. Probably 90% of the deals that we've done in Western Kentucky have been community bank funded. Like, they're the people that are plugged in and that provide that liquidity that we need. But I did want to ask you this, because you mentioned it last week. Timmy and I, our parents, we grew up in a real estate household. So my dad was a developer and a commercial real estate broker, and that's the business that I have now. Our mother owned a Century 21 franchise, and at a certain time, it was the largest one in the state of Kentucky. And so, we just grew up in that kind of household. My mom always used to say, location, location, location. Last week, though, you were mentioning LTC. Will you explain a little bit to us about LTC?
Yes, I grew up in the same era. And so my dad, I'm a third generation MAI. So I was condemned in my DNA to be a dumbass appraiser. So I fought like became an economist and not be a dumbass appraiser. In the Appraisal Institute on my MAI, they burn me an effigy every 6 months when I say that. But
you deserve it, Casey. You deserve it.
I prefer her. That's why I wear this, Bo. I don't wear my MAI pin anymore. So my dad said, look, there's just two things you need to know. So I mentioned the cap rate. He said, all you need to know about cap rates, don't worry about the cap rate courses, just 10% plus or minus 2. He said, the other thing is, if you understand location in real estate, that's all you need to know. Location, location, location. Well, what I've learned is it's not location, location. It's LTC, location, timing, and capital. And you can have the best location, the best tenant, the best building, and if the timing's bad, like right now, you're screwed. And then if there's no capital, you're double screwed. And so we have a T&C problem right now that most don't understand. And so I tell people, you need every day. It's kind of like, you got two side mirrors and you got a one rear view mirror. So it's location, timing, and capital.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really smart. Like that landed with me, just the way you framed that.
I think in pictures. So
that's the way I am. I was dyslexic. And so you get an email from me, the "the" is always spelled T-E-H and is A-D-N. And I don't know why the keyboard can't fix that. But it was really hard. And so I'm a very visual learner. And most real estate people, would you say, Bo, we're very visual.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
That's why we had cocktail napkins. So we put the numbers in the four corners and then yes or no in the middle because we were very visual on what we do. Some millennial puts a Argus in front of us that they don't even understand what they input there. And so we go back to let's visualize these numbers, and I always am trying to visualize it.
Timmy, Argus is this program essentially that underwrites properties in a super mega sophisticated way. And to work the program, you have to go take a course just to figure out how to put things into it. I don't know how to do it, but yeah, that's the technical term too. Super mega sophisticated underwriting.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Yeah.
For you, Timmy, there's the rest of the musical.
Yeah.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Music, a picture, and a food smell. We can learn anything. I don't know why in school they're not baking chocolate chip cookies, or let us look out the windows because we never had that. Or have music. Then we'd all learn.
Yes. That's so true. God, that's so true.
Well, Timmy,
Yeah.
any questions before we transition here?
How do we fix all this? How do we get the Fed to listen to you? When will they learn? Why does it have to go through a recession for it to be fixed? Like that? Why? What? The Fed's got to have a good reason, right? Like, what? Like the Fed's not doing this because they know that what they're doing sucks.
Timmy's presupposition is that the Fed is inherently good.
Well,
I think.
I no, not necessarily. Well, I think the benefit of the doubt. If we're to give the benefit of the doubt, okay, right? So like they're not just. I mean, maybe they're just evil, right? But you understand what I'm asking? Like what? Okay,
I got the answer for you. So your mom or grandma probably had a saying to someone that didn't know what they were doing or functioning. It was called, "Well, bless their pea-picking little heart."
Yeah.
Just a dumbass, right?
Yeah.
You're well-intentioned, but you don't know what you don't know. The Fed is, well, bless their pea-picking little heart. They don't know their academics. They worked on their PhD until they were in their 40s. They waited on tables. They lived off mom and dad. They've never worked in a real job. They've never had to make a payroll, figure out a business, make a conviction about, I'm going to invest in something. The Fed can't invest in anything. They'll have to just have a blind, bond fund or whatever. So these people have no industry experience. And the way we fix it is we need to get a central bank that is at least, a third to a half composed of industry experts. How about a Warren Buffett on the damn thing,
Right. Yeah.
Really, good people, or Bo, or someone from the CCIM or our leaders that understand this stuff or whatnot. But there's no industry experience. And so when I sat in there for 5 years, I was the only appraiser in the history of the Fed and the only MAI to ever serve to explain to them about real estate and how it functioned. And this is a true story you'll get a kick out of. So you may go way back. So Timmy, believe it or not, before the great housing crisis, 2008 or 9, the banks were reviewed or examined on a consistent basis. One bank had been reviewed 10 years ago, another one just recently. So we had no idea how our banking system was performing. So we created this idea of stress tests. Let's stress test the biggest, largest banks every year on the same issues to see if they have enough capital. So we implemented these stress tests. So the first ones that were supposed to come out in 2009, they were supposed to come out in the fall, and they had to be stalled. And I was culpable for that vote. So the examiners come back and they say, "News, Chairman Bernanke, the residential mortgage crisis is all contained to residential, and it won't affect commercial real estate at all." And being who I am and my Irish roots and growing up out west and not knowing how to swear politely yet in the South, I let a Colorado expletive out. And it was the real thing that you put your cowboy boots in. And so Chairman Bernanke says, "Wait a minute, Casey, what are you talking about?" So we spent 2 or 3 hours trying to draw out of the examiners that had gone out and done these initial stress tests, how is it that they concluded that commercial real estate would be unaffected by everything that was happening in residential? So finally, Bernanke said, "Well, Casey, tell them why you're thinking this way." And I said, "Well, and Bo knows this. So commercial real estate follows the rooftops. So a shopping center, they don't go build a grocery store out in a farm field. They wait until there's 10,000 houses, and then they'll build a shopping center, and then they'll build doctor's offices." So I said, if there's nobody moving into these subdivisions and households, and commercial real estate thinks they are, and they're building stuff, commercial real estate's going to crash and burn. And in 2009, the whole CMBS permanent market crashed and burned. So I said, it has to. I said, So I said, let me try to draw out from these examiners why they think this way. So this one examiner, state examiner, he raises his hand and he goes, there's this thing in these loans. And it says that if the condo's not selling, if the subdivision's not selling, if the apartment's not leasing up, the bank has to give the developer money. I said, are you talking about an interest reserve? So this is if a project finishes and maybe it's hit the market just wrong. Most loans after the 1970s and 80s, we said, let's have a cushion. So for 12 months or 18 months, we'll advance the funds to pay the interest so it's not a non-accrual or impaired loan and cause problems with banks. But it runs out after 12 or 18 months. And under GAAP accounting, it says it's an impaired loan. So I said, do any of you know what GAAP accounting is? Your bank examiners, you're supposed to know this. I said, it's a freaking impaired loan. It's going to crash and burn 12 to 18 months later. So the chairman agreed with me and said, we got to go redo all the bank stress tests. So if you remember in 2009, they didn't come out in 2009. We had to wait till 2010. And I was responsible for them to have them go back out there and over the holidays, re-examine and stress test all the banks. So a group of state bank examiners out of New York said, this just ticks me off. I'm going to miss the holidays. So I had to do a presentation explaining all this. And so one of them said, let's just leak it to the media and they'll put a timeout on all this and we'll do it, in the winter. So they leaked my whole presentation to the Wall Street Journal.
Oh,
And it was the front page of the business section. And so I'm sitting there in my, in my Atlanta Fed or New York Fed office, and all of a sudden security comes in, they usher me out of the building. I go home, my credentials, my security credentials are pulled. I go home and I try to pull in the driveway, but there's all these dark colored Ford cars that are on the street and in my driveway. They're taking computers out of my house. They're doing search warrants. They thought I leaked it. And so it took about a month to figure out who really did leak it and to restore my credentials. And so the apology I got from Chairman Bernanke is he invited me back. He said, I apologize. Would you like a bear claw donut? So Bernanke likes bear claw donuts. And when he wants to make up for something he screwed up, he invites you to a bear claw donut. But that's how incompetent this Fed was. They had no idea how construction loans work. They didn't understand an interest reserve. They didn't understand why commercial real estate was going to blow up. And I was the only one. And if I hadn't been there, that dot would not have been connected probably for another 2 years.
wow.
The whole would have been worse. And that's what scares me right now, is that the Federal Reserve influences the type assets that a bank has to hold. So Silicon Valley Bank was built on a business model, high risk, fund all the venture capital in the world, all these high risk businesses that could crash and burn at any time. So the San Francisco Fed said to Silicon Valley Bank, you need to hold really safe liquid assets. And the bank said, okay, what are those? Oh, well, 10-year treasuries. They're very liquid. They're very safe. So they load up on 10-year treasuries that then have to be marked to market and aren't worth a damn thing. The Fed created the whole damn problem in Silicon Valley Bank, and we don't let one industry or one company be financed by one bank. And for the first time since, I guess, before the great housing recession and maybe going back to the 80s, did we allow one industry and one bank to finance it all. And so these fundamental things that were missed in bank supervision, and there is no accountability for it. The whole bank supervision should be overhauled. We should require that a third of all the appointments and whatnot be real practicing business leaders that have high integrity. And when you build industry experience, this, Bo, if you're going to have a partner, I have a partner. I don't have a government, or an academic on my partner. I have a real world, someone that complements to know what's going on. We don't have that in the Fed. It's academic. And so bless their pea-picking little hearts, they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
Casey, to your point, I got a call yesterday from somebody I met in Boston who passed her exam and got her designation, or CCIM designation. And she calls me, she says, look, we've got a site here that might be great for self-storage, and we love self-storage. And it's down in the Nashville area. And so I pull it up online, and I've got a partner in Nashville that I do some stuff with. I call him up, and this is what I ask him. Is it, because from the aerial, it looks like it's between two population centers. And what I want to know is it being built out? Are there a whole bunch of rooftops filling in between? Because I don't want to put a self-storage facility somewhere before the rooftops are there. Like, you're absolutely right. The development, the commercial side of things, it follows those rooftops. Last thing I'd want to be is be the first one in there. I mean, maybe I get lucky, but probably it'd be a terrible idea.
Well, that's where economic-based analysis comes into play. So you can see the future rooftops that are coming in, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So Bo knows we have, in CCIM, we have really good tools. We have this thing called Site to Do Business. It's a really powerful market analytics tool, and it's partnered up with something called Esri. So it brings all the pictures. So you can visualize the aerial or the rooftops or the things you want. So on that line, Bo, I had one with Dollar General. So they were trying to get another Dollar General store done in between areas in a city in Alabama. And unless it has an X or an O on it, they don't approve it. It has to have an X or an O. It's all football in Alabama. And so what we found in using the site to do business data is in the gap analysis, which it tells you where you have a gap in something. Where's a use that's not being served? And so what they call leakage. So people leave this area and they go over here to buy their stuff.
Timmy knows leakage.
I know leakage in more ways than one.
There you go. And it's not just for senior living facilities, but yeah. So we got to this county and the council that was going to turn this Dollar General down and showed them how much tax revenue they were losing. And this is where the demand was. And so those are tools that people like CCIMs have. We can visualize it. We can do the analytics. We can quantify it. So we got the deal. We almost had it approved, but there was one holdout, one influential county commissioner. And I said, well, what's your problem? We've proven everything. What's your problem? He goes, I just don't like the color yellow. I said, really? Are you going to restripe all your roads? Because I don't like the color yellow you have in your town. So if you don't allow Dollar General, then I think we need to have you restripe all your roads. And he goes, oh my God. All right, we'll let it go. So when I showed him the yellow on their roads for striping was the same as Dollar General, they got the deal approved. So that's what we have to rethink our brain and how we get something done.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's so good. I like the way you think, Casey.
Well, they say I'm crazy, and I say I agree, but usually I'm crazy right. That's why my business card I put that I'm a futurist. And it's not because really I think I'm that smart. Like, take the time, like Bo knows CCIMs are trained to connect the dots. Most of what we do is common sense in connecting the dots. And so if you take anything away from commercial real estate, it's common sense. If it doesn't make sense to you, your gut's right. And if you can't connect the dots, and that's why I always triangulate. Before I make an opinion, I want to see 3 confirming independent kind of data sources that affirm that conclusion. If I don't have them, I triangulate. So Red Shoe Economist, you see there's some triangles in my logo behind there? Lots of triangles.
Hell yeah.
Well, Timmy, you ready for a pop quiz? Casey, the way we do this is I'm going to ask Timmy 5 questions. So my first question is, as Casey was sharing with us earlier about the Federal Reserve, how many districts does the Federal Reserve have?
12.
12 is correct.
See? I was. That's my favorite thing to hear at the end of these. You were listening. Yes. Yes, I was. Thank you.
All right. Casey, do you have a question for Timmy?
Yeah. So I like to wear a certain color shoes. What color shoes does the blank shoe economist wear?
Alabama. Talked about Alabama. There's a coach. I'm gonna say red shoe economist. Yeah.
My daughters and wife are worried because I have more red shoes than them. I've got 12 pairs of red shoes right now.
Okay, I have another question about the Fed. Casey mentioned 3 particular Fed districts that they're absolutely train wrecks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember which 3 he mentioned?
Missouri, Kansas City. That was 2. That was the 2 in one place.
Right. Yep.
Texas.
Use your right brain and your left brain.
Okay. Was it? Was Texas one of them?
In Kentucky, what are the 3 places you'd never take somebody hunting with you if they were from?
Hold on, let me look at my notes here, because I feel like I wrote down.
Janet Yellen came from one of them. You got him on this one, though.
I think I might have.
Yeah.
I'm in one of them, and the other two, you would never take someone from these locations with you hunting in Kentucky. Am I right, Bill?
That is very true. Very true.
So would that be? I don't know where you are. Missouri? Is that one of them? No.
In the South,
In the South. Alabama.
Atlanta.
Oh yes. Yeah. So we got Atlanta. I remember now because you said Atlanta. And I didn't write this. Atlanta, Chicago.
No,
Nope.
but it's bad. But
Atlanta.
think of where people are moving from. Where are they moving from? To the biggest.
Nashville. Nashville.
No, Nashville's where they're moving to.
Oh yeah.
They're moving from.
Oh.
Nancy Pelosi lives in one of them.
Oh well. Oh goodness. Oh goodness.
Being used to be near one of them.
Oh yeah. Well, California.
Alcatraz.
Yeah.
San Francisco.
California. Yeah. San Francisco.
And then the one by
Seattle?
New York.
Oh, New York.
New
There you
York.
go.
New York
New York, San Francisco.
and Atlanta. All right. So I mean, that was that. Man. That's all right. Can't get them all. Can't get them all. I do. I was that. I remember not writing that down.
Casey, why don't you give us the next question?
All right. So there was a ratio that I talked about
112.
that every real estate lender, every broker should be focused on because they might not be there when they go to close the loan. What was that ratio?
Was it? Did it have to do with the Texas?
You're there.
Yeah.
The Texas.
Yeah. That
That's it?
ratio. That was it.
The Texas ratio.
All right.
Okay.
We're back on top.
Last question. And we heard growing up about location. Casey framed this for us a little bit different, and he gave us the framework of LTC. What does LTC stand for?
We've got location, timing, capital.
Good job.
You got it.
Well, Casey, thank you so much for your time. This is very enlightening. If you had like one thing to say to, if you had one piece of advice to give to investors, anybody in commercial real estate, as we come upon what might happen in the next couple weeks, what would be what's a word of advice you would give?
Yes, I go back to the kind of the capital thing. We've got to figure out how to fix capital to our industry. And my recommendation right now for probably the next year, credit unions may be your capital savior. And so we've got more credit unions than we do banks. I've had 2 deals already that were like Walmart triple net lease deals, credible deals that Wells Fargo walked on and Truist wouldn't even quote on. And we took it to Delta Credit Union and it got done in 30 days. So the capital side of the credit union. The other thing I'd say is if you're having trouble sleeping in too much, I'll give you one book recommendation. So Alabama, they don't like these kind of books because there's no pictures. It's called The Lords of Easy Money, how the Federal Reserve broke the economy. And he is so spot on. If you want to understand this, and it's written in good lay language, no academic stuff, this is my book recommendation. And if that one isn't good for you. So this is the paper that I published at Alabama. So I had to explain logistics and supply chain to them. So I knew I had to have pictures. So my son helped me develop this logistics transformer. So you get
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
And so every section in the report has lots of
Pictures.
lots of pictures and graphs, and so this is very Alabamian friendly.
Yeah.
Alabama. And so I know how to write for Alabama with lots of pictures, but that book doesn't have a lot of pictures. But if you need pictures, you need to understand supply chain. Here's the one I'll send you on that one. But I like picture books. I hated going to first grade. They took away all my picture books. I just had a terrible time.
Oh my God, me too, Casey. We're kindred spirits in that way.
Well, the last thing I'll tell you is I speak about 80 times a year. And so maybe you can help me with this, Timmy. So people ask, why do you go speak so much and travel around the world? And I said, well, look, for the last 10 years, I've been hoping I'd get discovered. So I just did a deal in Long Beach. And I said, the next late night show host, that gets fired, we just saw Tucker Carlson, Don Lemon, maybe they'll clean out the late night show. Bo, Timmy, we could do a late night economics comedy show that could save America. So I'm hoping we could get discovered. So if you find an opportunity, I'd love to create a late night economics comedy show. We could do it.
Yeah, I think so. Let's stay connected on that. There might definitely be something there.
Making economics cool.
Yeah, making it fun and cool with pictures and jokes and no barbecue.
And we could have we could have the quiz at the end at about 1 a.m. before we go off air and see if anybody's still awake. And look how well Timmy did. I mean, he did great.
Yeah, we'll turn it into a drinking game, and we'll see how good I do at the pop quiz. All right, Casey, where can people find you?
So our website is www.redshoeeconomics, and there are 2 E's, N of E, and the economics.com. And here's the good news. All my presentations, all my humor, all my research, if you go to the media tab, it's all right there, and it's all free. So
awesome.
We make it transparent, we make it free, and we even present it to the Fed. They still won't put it in their OMC, but redshoeeconomics.com, and then CCIM.com has one at ccim.com/insights. So all the papers and research that I do there with videos, but they make me be more serious, Bo. We get less serious on our website.
Yeah,
I get it.
I'm going to the website. Cool.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was a blast. This was the most fun I've ever had talking economics.
If you want more and access to bonus content or a place that shows you everywhere we are on the internet, just hit the first link in the show notes. But above everything else, thank you. Please do all the things that podcasts ask you to do. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, notification bell, leave us a comment of any questions, thoughts, and of course you can find us on all these social media channels at Commercially Speaking.